The studio of The View buzzed with a unique energy that morning, one of those rare live television days where the air itself seemed charged. The lights shone brilliantly, reflecting off the polished wood and glass surfaces of the set, and the cameras sat poised, operators adjusting focus and angles with precise care. The audience, filled with a mix of longtime fans and curious newcomers, murmured excitedly, waving their hands as the stage crew guided them to their seats. Today's guest was a figure whose presence alone could quiet a room, command attention, and shift the dynamics of any conversation: Rowan Atkinson. Rowan, the iconic actor whose name conjured images of both Mr. Bean's silent, chaotic genius and the biting satirical wit of Blackadder, was known for his precise timing, intelligence, and the kind of understated gravitas that demanded respect. Live television often brought out the unpredictability in both hosts and guests, but today, everyone sensed that this encounter could become something more. The producers huddled briefly behind the cameras, whispering last-minute notes and adjustments, yet there was a shared understanding that the magic, or chaos, of live TV was about to happen. Joy Behar sat behind her desk, coffee in hand, flipping through her cue cards. Her eyes glimmered with a mix of mischief and determination. She was a master of the on-air jibe, of pushing boundaries and provoking conversation, and this morning she was in her element. Rowan Atkinson, whose public persona was famously private and meticulous, presented her with a tantalizing target. She didn't intend to be cruel, but she did intend to challenge him in a way that would test his poise. The audience sensed her anticipation and leaned in, as if they were already in on the brewing tension. Whoopi Goldberg, as always, opened the show with her warm, inviting voice, welcoming viewers and hyping the audience. Today on The View, we have a special treat. Please welcome a man who has made generations laugh and think, Rowan Atkinson. The applause was immediate and thunderous. Rowan stepped onto the set, his dark suit immaculate, his movements precise and deliberate. He offered the audience a polite smile, acknowledging the cheers without breaking the calm that was his signature. He shook hands with Whoopi, exchanged nods with Sunny Hostin and Sarah Haynes, and sat next to Joy with a subtle, respectful nod. The energy in the room shifted. His presence alone seemed to pull everyone into a focused attentiveness. The conversation began with light fare, Rowan's new film, a witty, cleverly layered satire that played on both social absurdity and human folly. He spoke with measured eloquence, explaining his process in developing characters, the subtle humor that underscored the narrative, and the careful balance between levity and social commentary. The audience responded with laughter at his well-timed jokes and polite applause at his thoughtful insights. The tone seemed comfortable, even genial, until Joy leaned forward, a sparkle of mischief in her eyes, and shifted the conversation. Rowan, she began, her voice light but pointed, you've made a career out of making people laugh, often at the expense of serious topics. Don't you think there's a risk that humor can cross the line? Maybe even offend people unnecessarily? The audience hushed, sensing the shift. This wasn't a new question for Joy, she had pressed similar ones with politicians and other celebrities. But with Rowan, whose public demeanor was careful and deliberate, the tone was different, less teasing, more testing. Rowan regarded her calmly, pausing for a brief moment as if weighing each word. Joy, he said in his trademark even tone, the purpose of comedy is rarely to offend. Its role is to reflect, to hold a mirror to society's absurdities. If someone feels discomfort, it's often because the comedy is revealing truths they'd rather ignore. There was a ripple of appreciation in the audience. Polite applause swelled, but Joy's smile faltered slightly. She leaned closer, undeterred. So you're saying that it's acceptable to push boundaries, even if some people are upset? Some might call that irresponsible. Rowan's response was calm, precise, and deliberate. Responsibility, in my view, isn't avoiding discomfort, it's being mindful of intent. Comedy has the power to enlighten, to provoke thought. If the effect is discomfort, perhaps it is a discomfort worth having. The audience reacted immediately, murmurs and applause mingling as the tension in the room became palpable. Joy's brow furrowed slightly, but she pressed on, her tone sharpening. But there must be limits, right? Surely some subjects are too sensitive for humor, too real to be joked about without causing harm. Rowan's voice remained steady, his calm commanding attention. Limits exist, yes, he said, but they are not determined by fear of offense. They are determined by intent. To mock, demean, or belittle is irresponsible. But to illuminate, even uncomfortably, is the essence of comedy's power. The audience leaned forward, riveted. Joy blinked, momentarily caught off guard by the clarity and weight of his argument. She opened her mouth to respond, but the words stumbled, the familiar confidence that had carried her through countless live confrontations momentarily shaken. Rowan's presence wasn't loud or aggressive, yet it carried an undeniable authority. "Are you telling me, then," Joy asked cautiously, "that nothing is truly off limits for the sake of a joke?" Rowan's gaze sharpened, though his expression remained composed. "I am saying that what matters most is not the subject itself, but the manner and intent behind its treatment. Humor, wielded with care, can challenge, provoke, and illuminate. If it is done with malice, it fails. If it is done with insight, it succeeds, even if it unsettles some people." The tension in the View studio lingered even as the commercial break ended. The audience, still buzzing from the earlier exchange between Rowan Atkinson and Joy Behar, returned to their seats murmuring excitedly, some pointing to the stage, whispering about what had just occurred. There was a palpable sense of anticipation in the air, a collective understanding that the previous segment had transcended routine entertainment and entered the realm of something memorable, something almost historic for live television. Joy Behar, meanwhile, returned to her seat, though her posture was noticeably more rigid. Her hands rested tensely on the desk, gripping her cue cards a little too tightly, and her usual confident spark seemed dimmed, replaced by a flicker of frustration and calculation. She had faced countless guests, from politicians to Hollywood legends, yet Rowan Atkinson's calm precision had unsettled her in a way that was entirely new. The audience, picking up on her subtle shift in demeanor, leaned in, sensing the silent contest that still lingered in the studio's charged atmosphere. Whoopi Goldberg, as always the mediator and voice of reason, smiled warmly but knowingly, trying to smooth the tension. "All right, everyone," she began, her tone even but firm, "let's continue our conversation. Rowan's given us a lot to think about, and I know we're all eager to hear more about his work and insights." Rowan Atkinson, seated across from Joy, remained composed, his posture relaxed but his presence commanding. His calm, deliberate movements and soft, measured voice seemed to occupy every inch of the stage, subtly asserting his authority. Without raising volume or tension, the previous confrontation had already been widely discussed backstage, and now the cameras focused on him once again, capturing every nuance of his expressions, his slight smiles, thoughtful pauses, and the occasional raised eyebrow that punctuated his statements. Joy attempted to regain control, leaning forward slightly and directing the next question toward him. "Rowan, let's talk about responsibility in comedy. You've said humor is meant to provoke thought, but when does provocation cross into irresponsibility? Where's the line?" Rowan's expression remained neutral, but his gaze sharpened slightly. "Intent, Joy," he said calmly, each word deliberate. "The line is defined by what you intend to accomplish. If your goal is to belittle, to demean, or to harm, you've crossed it. If your goal is to reveal, to enlighten, or to challenge thinking, even uncomfortably, then you have not. The discomfort is often the point." The audience responded with polite applause, some nodding vigorously, clearly impressed with his articulation. The energy in the room shifted subtly, the earlier tension had transformed into something almost electric, an awareness that this was not just an interview but a demonstration of poise and intellect in real time. Joy, though, remained undeterred, trying to steer the conversation back to her intended line of questioning. "But surely," Joy pressed, voice rising slightly, "there are subjects so sensitive, so raw, that even good intentions can't justify joking about them. How do you navigate those situations?" Rowan leaned back slightly, folding his hands on the desk with a calm precision that seemed to amplify his authority. "Comedy doesn't operate in a vacuum," he replied, his voice measured and steady. "You must be aware of context, of history, of audience perception. Sensitivity is important, yes, but it does not mean avoiding challenging topics. It means approaching them thoughtfully, with awareness of the impact of your words. The goal is illumination, not cruelty." The audience, clearly captivated, leaned in as though straining to absorb every word. Even the production team behind the cameras paused momentarily, sensing the gravity of the exchange. The clip of the earlier confrontation had already begun circulating online, trending across social media, and comments praising Rowan's composure were flooding in by the second. Finally, "Someone puts Joy in her place respectfully," one tweet read. "Rowan Atkinson doesn't just make us laugh, he schools her on air," said another. Joy exhaled sharply, her fingers drumming nervously against the desk. She tried to recover, leaning forward and attempting a softer tone, hoping to regain some semblance of control over the conversation. So, intent is everything, then. But what if the audience misinterprets your intention? Rowan's gaze shifted momentarily to her, his eyes calm but piercing. Then it is an opportunity to clarify, to engage, to explain. Misinterpretation is inevitable in communication. The measure of responsibility lies in how you respond, not in how you try to preempt every possible misunderstanding. The audience erupted into applause, some standing, recognizing the subtle genius of his approach. Rowan had not only defended his position, but he had also done so without anger, without sarcasm, without condescension. His mastery of tone, timing, and clarity created a scenario in which Joy's usual tactics of provocation and teasing fell flat against the armor of his composure. Joy opened her mouth again, attempting to press further, but the words faltered. The combination of Rowan's calm confidence and the audience's visible support had created a rare moment. The seasoned host was momentarily stilled, observing. Rather than controlling the flow of conversation, the power dynamics of live television had shifted, subtly but unmistakably.